Hey everyone, it's Anna Sierra from Red Lipstick Club. Okay, I had to talk about this. If I didn't talk about it, I would totally regret it. And I'm looking forward to launching or relaunching my podcast talking about some of the amazing topics that came up when I watched the Ultimatum Queer Love on Netflix. Now, I don't know about you all, but I have loved all of these dating shows coming out of Netflix, and some of them got a little stale for me, like Love is Blind. It started to feel like there was a ton of people that just came on this show because they wanted to be famous. And I was really looking for some shakeup when it came to the dating shows from Netflix. And this one definitely was it. Now, they met my needs by not having Nick Lachey and Vanessa Lachey on this season. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate the non-bringing up of when are you going to have a child. Vanessa, look that up. The stress of that. Stop it, girl. But the Ultimatum Queer Love to me was just amazing reality television. If you don't know, I am a huge ally in my local community and just globally. I just want people to be able to live their lives authentically, love who they love. And this show to me was the perfect example of that. So let's talk about it, you guys. I know everybody's been talking about it for a while. I know it's been on the internet. I had to really think about it. Do I want to go on the internet and talk about it? Yes, I do. And I knew I did when I started following everybody from the show, seeing their stories, getting the backgrounds. And I think that's why I didn't talk about it right away, because I kind of wanted some behind the scenes information and tea on what was happening. Because when you do a reality show, you're getting a snippet of what actually occurred. And there's some adjustments, there's some production that happens, there's a lot of manipulation that happens within reality TV. So I didn't want to put all my eggs in one basket and have a ton of opinions about it before seeing a little backup behind what was happening. But if you have not tuned in to the Ultimatum Queer Love, turn this off, go watch it, come back, see what I have to say. So let's just start with the beginning. If you have never watched any of the Ultimatum shows, basically it's the most effed up system you could possibly go into in the reality TV dating series. But I almost feel like it's the most authentic, because everyone that's coming on this show, they're actually couples that are coming in here. It's not a whole bunch of strangers coming into a room. These people know each other coming into this situation. And I think that's what really makes this show completely different from so many that we've seen. And also, I think because the premise of this and the goal at the end is to be married, the stakes seem higher than just going to hang out on an island or whatever the case may be on other reality shows. So let's talk about this one. So there are a total of 5 couples that are coming to the Ultimatum at the beginning. And these are all queer couples. Either they identify as lesbian or they are in sapphic couples, so to speak. So they're basically, some of them may be gender nonconforming. They might be fluid. It varied between couples. But ultimately, it was a female-focused group in this Ultimatum. So to clear it off from the bat, you guys, the pronouns are kind of all over the place with this show. If there's one thing that I could say Netflix kind of did not do the job on, was making sure the pronouns were up front from the beginning. If you're going to invest the money and you're going to invest yourself as an organization to do something like this, set it up for success and have the pronouns right and on the screens. At this point, people are knowledgeable enough to where they see it, they understand it, and they get it. But when you don't give it to them, and then after the fact, you expect them to know, and people are kind of getting beat up online for not knowing every pronoun. I'm honestly irritated by people doing that, because I'm like, you guys, the show didn't even have the pronouns on there. So everybody's guessing unless you looked it up. And even then, you don't know if it's actually right. So after some time, seeing what the pronouns are, as I explain these couples, you guys, I will say their pronouns. I'm going to be very focused on making sure I get those right. But if I make a slip or two, no, charge it to my mind, not my heart. It's a lot going on. But there are some different pronouns that are happening. I want to respect that through this process because it's important. And It's not that serious. I mean, it's like somebody asking you to not call them by their nickname, but by their actual full name. It's no different than that. And get it together, right? So here we go. We get to this show. First off, all the couples come there looking their best, very attractive couples. I loved it. It was very diverse cast. And by diverse, it was diverse in many ways for me. Number one, it was racially diverse. So you pretty much saw everybody under the sun in there. And what I loved is there was so much Asian AAPI representation, which is so rare. And to see that, loved it. Almost reminds me with Deep D being on Love is Blind, and just seeing that representation and the culture of that and how that impacts your marriage decision making. It gave me those same types of feels to see that AAPI representation. So I love that so much. And so we definitely got a lot of representation when it came to race. We also did based off just how people identify. And it wasn't just one type of a lesbian woman or a lesbian in general, or sapphic in general. It was just a whole variety. And I love that so much, because if you actually are in the community, you see this all the time. But the general public, they don't experience this. They don't know the intricacies. And so I just think it's important to show a real diverse image of what the community looks like for those that are not involved in the community or don't really know as many people in the community, so they can kind of see this is diverse just like you. And they have different outlooks on life just like you, and actually you might relate to some of them more than you thought. And I'll speak to that later, but it was amazing. So one of the first couples that comes up, which one of them is my absolute favorite, and I'm sorry to be biased, but Mal and Yoli. And so Mal, I believe, is around 35, 36 years old. And Yoli's also in her 30s. I think she was like 31 or 32 when they filmed this. And at that age, I think about myself, I'm a woman in her 30s, in her late 30s. And I think about where, I'm at, and even at their age, where I was at when it came to marriage and commitment. And so to me, right off the bat, what I loved on top of the diversity is the age diversity here, because in the first season of the Ultimatum, which was a heterosexual, so to speak, even though there was somebody that later came out as bi, but either way, the premise of the original season was a heterosexual situation. And in that, they were so young. And so it was really hard for me to identify or connect to them, because at that age, I'm sorry, there's no way at that age, when I actually became 22 or 24, that I was thinking about marriage. There's no way. And so it just didn't feel as realistic to me to be giving somebody an ultimatum at that age. It just felt completely off to me. So this one felt a lot more relatable, honestly, because a lot of the individuals in here were older, and it just felt more realistic to give out an ultimatum. So I'm hoping at this time, if you're watching this video, this isn't the first time you've heard about what the premise of the ultimatum is. At this point, it's been all over the internet. But if you don't know, basically there's one person within this couple that has given the ultimatum to the other person. And at the end of the day, it's either number one, you leave with the person you came with, engaged and ready to get married. You leave with somebody that you're connected to, that you meet within the experiment, that you spend a 3-week trial marriage with. And you decide at that point you'd like to be engaged with that person, or maybe date that person, or you leave alone and you decide none of these options is going to work for me. So that's pretty much the premise. And you give an ultimatum, you get a chance to experiment with somebody else to see if maybe it's your person, or that maybe the person that you're with is the issue as to why you're not moving on to the next level, or that experiment could show you that your person is the exact right person. And then at the end of the day, you both decide to leave together, leave separately, or maybe each of you decides to leave with the new partner you met through the experiment. So it's a pretty simple premise, and I don't really like to spoil it. I would love for people to go watch it and actually see it explained for yourself. But that's just kind of what the overall gist is. You're giving an ultimatum. Your ultimate goal when you give the ultimatum is to walk away with your partner, engaged, get married. That's your ultimate goal. So one of the first couples, like I said, was Mal and Yoli, and they're in their 30s, and I really identified with that. They've been together, I believe, around 3 years or so. And they met in, I think, a general way, like going out. Yoli worked at like a Barney's, I believe. She was like a stylist. So they met in that situation during a Pride Month, conveniently, but they just basically met out. And that's a pretty easy way. And I love that they didn't meet out at a club, because I know for a lot of my friends, especially in the community, it's really hard to meet people for relationships outside of club bar atmosphere. So the fact that they did not meet in that was kind of cool. It showed some diversity and how you can actually meet somebody in the community and then have a full-on partnership. And I would say for Mal, she's an African-American woman, and it seemed in that relationship she was kind of playing more of the male role in that situation. And I don't like to really use male, because like, this is a lesbian relationship. There are two women, and she should be able to express her femininity. And honestly, she had some femininity to me, even though she maybe was masculine presenting, oozed out of Mal, which it was like so attractive to see that, just the sensitivity of her. I just love that about Mal. But I guess if a straight hetero couple were to look at them, you might look at Mal and say she's playing more of a male predominant role in that, where, just thinking mindset wise, Mal wanted to have all her ducks in a row before she committed to marriage. And just for pronouns purposes, Mal went by she, her, they, so all three, and Yoli went by she, her. So just pronouns, if how I'm using them, that's how. So one of the struggles that they had, Yoli was the one that presented the ultimatum to Mal. Yoli said, hey, I'm ready to get married. And Mal's response to that was, I'm not saying I'm not ready or wanting to marry you. I'm saying financially, I don't feel as prepared as I want to feel to, number one, start a family and feel secure and taking care of my home, and not just me. And as a woman, I'm actually, I'm a heterosexual woman. I date men. And I'll be honest with you, hearing Mal talk reminded me of so many, especially Black men that I have interacted with, dated, that they really struggle with that. And they want to be at a certain position in life before they commit to marriage. And it's completely opposite of my parents, and probably even their parents. My parents got married. They were broke. They were like in their 20s getting married, and they came out together and they built it up together. It was a partnership, and they built a home and a life together. And it's interesting, I'm noticing, especially for like millennials and younger, is that some switch happened where a lot of Black men, especially, instead of them thinking, hey, I should get a partner and build with my partner and grow that way, they feel like they have to come to the table already having those pieces together. And I don't know if it's because you don't want to depend, you don't, not even that you don't want to depend on anybody, but you feel as though if somebody else has any investment in what you're doing, number one, they'll get credit for it, or you'll owe them something. And I don't know if it's because you haven't seen a partnership work in real life to know that that's not necessarily how that's going to work. I don't know, but I saw my parents being partners, so that's just my personal mentality. But it has been incredibly difficult dating as a Black woman with so many Black men having that mindset. So I did identify with Yoli and the stress and the struggle and the frustration with dating somebody that felt you needed to have every single financial duck in a row before you pursue marriage and a family, because it's just not feasible in a lot of situations. And I'm not saying you should be flat broke and not be able to pay your light bill to have kids, but for the most part, these people are two people that have it together. I mean, there might be some gaps in there, but it's not like they're on the street trying to have a kid, So Yoli bringing that ultimatum as far as that was concerned, and kind of seeing Mal stall around it, I totally got that. What I did love, though, is Mal brought up her own reservations outside of financial. And Mal brought up the point that Yoli was somebody that she has recognized and witnessed falls in love really quick and has had great experiences with exes and speaks highly of those experiences, and yet is still not married, though, and seems to have had very intense relationships with everybody. And so Mal is basically like, what makes me different from everybody else? Why would you want to marry me? You've had all these great relationships with all your exes. what's the difference? You fall for everyone. And that was interesting to hear, because if you've ever dated somebody that you feel maybe just falls in love really quickly and just gets really emotionally involved and invested pretty fast, and at the end of the day, you're thinking, well, what makes me different from the last person that you were this quickly involved with and invested in? So I felt that Mal as well had a very valid reason for having some reservations on whether or not marriage was the next step at that particular time for Yoli and Mal. So that's one of the first couples. Might have sounded long-winded, but I just think these intricacies are so important. And because I love talking about relationships and love, I really want to talk about what those relationships were before the experiment even started, because I think they're really important and they really shape how these relationships changed and evolved as the show went on. So that's relationship number 1. Now, number 2, I'm going to go with Xander and Vanessa. So there have been mixed opinions about both of them. And I will just say, first off, I have some amazing girlfriends that will entertain me in all these shenanigans. And I had one of my favorite girlfriends watch the show with me. We first watched the show. And of course, Mal immediately we were obsessed with. But we were watching Xander and Vanessa. And Vanessa, we were so turned off by immediately from the first episode of this show. And that to me is so interesting, that you can have a personality that is so off-putting when somebody first meets you, that it can really shape how they view you for days, weeks, months, even years to come, and how they treat you. And I'm pretty sure that Vanessa learned a valuable lesson going through this process, because Vanessa absolutely had the personality that would literally put somebody off from day one and totally shape how she is viewed, whether or not that is actually how they exist in the world. The first impression from Vanessa was so off-putting that it didn't even matter. And that's really unfortunate, but it did make for great reality television, so I'm not that mad about it. But Vanessa and Xander were another couple. I'll call them couple 2. Xander uses they, them pronouns. Pretty sure. I think they might have used her, but I'm going to use they, them for Xander, because even Xander's name is pretty ambiguous, so I feel more comfortable using they, them. And then Vanessa is she, her. And Vanessa said she is pansexual. So if you're someone that's maybe not familiar, it really isn't about how you identify. It's really just about how Vanessa connects to people. So you could be a trans man or a trans woman. You could be a gay identifying man, a lesbian identifying woman, a straight identifying man, a straight identifying heterosexual woman. And either way, if Vanessa is attracted to you and you are together, that's what it is. It has nothing to do with how you identify. So Vanessa's pansexual. And I could totally see that. Sometimes I have some, personally for me, there's some people that I could absolutely see myself maybe potentially dating, even though I'm primarily heterosexual, but I could totally see someone being pansexual, because there are certain people that they just have an energy about them that is just so electric and magnetic that you are just completely attracted to them. So that's kind of how I felt about Vanessa, and I could totally see where Vanessa was coming from. So Xander and Vanessa have known each other since high school, and their ex-boyfriends were actually best friends through high school, and that's how they knew each other. You know, go down a few years down the line, they run into each other again. And I'm assuming Vanessa sensed something in Xander at that point that made her feel that Xander might be a lesbian. So she came out and asked Xander, hey, are you gay? And Xander said yes. And ultimately they ended up together. So this is, I guess if you could think about being like a young queer individual and you had a crush on somebody maybe growing up, but you couldn't act on it. You just went about your typical heterosexual existence and how you knew the world. And imagine running into that person that maybe you have the crush on in high school, and they see you the way you really are for the first time, and they're open to knowing you romantically in that way. That's what it kind of felt like. So if you think about the energy, it's almost like, the quote unquote nerd gets the head cheerleader. That's kind of the vibe they gave me, where Xander, we know, was like the nerd growing up and then gets the head cheerleader, and that's their existence. So Xander is the one that gave the ultimatum. They've been together, I think, around 3 to 4 years. Living in Hawaii, they actually had like a travel vlog and Instagram that they were doing. They were actually travel influencers, I'm pretty sure. And also Xander was, I think, a physical therapist. So they had careers. They were, as far as things they love to do, very equally matched and yoked in that way. But where they found their struggles at, I think, were like moral issues, and then just where they wanted to be in their relationship. And you'll, as you watch the show, I don't want to tell all the spoilers, but you want to watch the show, because there's areas where you see some moral conflict with the two of them. But also Vanessa is somebody that's a free spirit, that doesn't want to be tied down, that isn't really keen on being married. And Xander's like, I want a family. I want to have my partner. I want to get married. That's my goal. So they're in conflict with that. And that's why Xander brought Vanessa to the show. Our third couple that I want to bring up is Tiff and Mildred. Now, Tiff goes by they, them pronouns. And Mildred is she, her pronouns. And I have seen this couple so many times in my actual life that I'm scared. And I've actually witnessed this type of couple so many times. And the back and forth, the toxicity between these two was interesting and scary and unfortunate. And as you'll see the show progress, you'll see that as well. But Mildred is the one that brought Tiff and gave the ultimatum to Tiff about being married. And Mildred has, number one, is a divorcee, has already been married before. Mildred also has a child, a 16-year-old special needs child, which adds another level to what's happening. And also Mildred is coming in with a high level of family trauma. Mix those all together, you already know what this is. Tiff has not been married. Tiff has their own issues, codependency issues, anger issues that are coming into this situation. So those two together are very volatile. But you'll recognize that they have the most sexual tension. They seem to be two of the most sexually compatible people on earth with their couple. And I'm sure we all have been in situations where we've been incredibly sexually compatible with somebody, and that energy was just magnetic and electric, and we couldn't let it go. But we knew the relationship outside of the bedroom was the worst for both people involved. And that's really what you're witnessing with these two. Okay, so couple number 4 is Ray and Lexi. And I love this couple so much, just because I felt like they had a joy about them, and a youth about them, which I liked. They were actually, I believe, one of the youngest couples there. Lexi was only 24 when this was filmed, and I think Ray was like 27. But they had been together for 3 years, and they did really kind of give the vibe of, this is my first ever long-term adult lesbian relationship. They kind of both gave that vibe. And I think probably what I loved about this couple is that it was a really great opportunity to see how the impact of culture can also impact how you see yourself and how open you are in a same-sex relationship. And I believe Ray is biracial. And Ray is AAPI. So, looking at that situation and culturally where that comes from, and having parents, some may or may not be that accepting, it reminds me a lot of, the Black culture, and just, you might get some parents that are accepting, but a lot of them are not. And culturally, we're just brought up to think being gay is just completely wrong. And it kind of felt as you're watching it, that Lexi kind of grew up in a completely different environment. It almost felt like Lexi grew up in just an incredibly accepting environment from day one. And as you watch the show, Lexi's parents are actually featured in the show as well. And it just felt like that was Lexi's experience. So when that's your experience since you've been younger, I think how you look at marriage and all those things is completely different from someone that grew up in a culture where, number one, perfection is really a big deal. And also culturally, being gay, being a lesbian is like a no-no. And it's a lot, culturally. So they were an interesting couple. And they were both femme presenting. But I think I don't want to say tomboy because that's kind of, but I just think that they just felt very comfortable. And I want, not even tomboy, but just both of them felt like athletes, like you could tell they both had some athletic nature, but if they want to wear their hair down and put some curls in their hair, put a cute top on, put a little lip gloss and mascara on, get themselves cute, put on a cute dress, whatever. That was the energy they were giving. And technically, for most people, they're going to say that's femme. They're both more feminine presenting. But I think they kind of towed the line a little bit. Both of them did. And some of them had, I think Lexi even exhibited some more dominant traits that you wouldn't necessarily connect with being a femme. So I did love the both of them together. So they're a very cute couple. And really just came down to Lexi wanting to get married and being ready for that. And Ray not knowing what they want to do. I feel like they're probably the easiest of all of them. Okay, so the last couple is Aussie and Sam. And Aussie goes by the pronouns Aussie. So Aussie is Aussie. Sam was she, her. So Aussie and Sam met during the pandemic. And I don't know about anybody else that's known or met any pandemic couples, but a lot of how you got to know each other is from a distance, right? And then by the time you got together, it was almost like you were in a persistent honeymoon phase. So issues that I guess you would have recognized pretty early on, you don't really, because you've almost been in a cloud of how you got to know each other. Well, fast forward a year and a half, and here we have Sam and Aussie trying to figure it out. And Sam issues the ultimatum to Aussie and is basically like, I am ready to get married. I'm not going to live with you for years, which is what Aussie is asking for. Like, let's live together 5 years and figure it out. The problem with that is Aussie is already in their 40s. So for you to ask somebody to live with you for 5 years and your partner is in their 30s and you're in your 40s, for them to give up 5 years of their life during these prime years is ridiculous. So it just kind of shows you from the beginning that Aussie is completely afraid of full-on investment and commitment. And Sam is ready to see what's happening. This isn't going to work for me. I need you to commit. So those are the 5 couples that are in this experiment. Now, this series is a series of 10. It's 10 episodes. The first 8 basically follow them through the relationships that are occurring. And if you know how the ultimatum works, these 5 couples come together and they spend one last night together before they split up and then become exes. So you'll hear in the show them referring to each other as exes throughout the series. And that's because it's the goal is to not feel like you're cheating on your partner, but you're exploring other options. So after they have that last night together and they break up and they're now all exes, now they take this group of 10 people and mix and match them all together to see who might be compatible for brand new couples to do a trial marriage with each other for a 3-week span of time. Now, I don't know about you guys, but there is no way I would take my relationship to something like this to test it out, to see if they can figure out if the grass is greener on the other side or whatever the case may be. Because in 3 weeks, it's absolutely going to be greener because we don't have the history, right? We don't have the hurts. We don't have the backgrounds that you have in a 1 year, 2 year, 3, 4 year relationship. So you're living in a cloud. You're living in a honeymoon phase. So I don't really feel like the premise of the situation necessarily gives you a realistic outlook of what marriage would be like. I think it gives you a really fun experiment and an opportunity to hang out and hook up with somebody and then potentially be able to go back to your partner and say it's all fine. I would recommend watching it, because for me, I don't really want to do a recap of everything, because it's been done before at this point. But basically, you will see each of these individuals in their new couples recognize a few things, and one about themselves and also about their former partners. How the couples ultimately end up coming together is our first couple, Mal and Yoli. Mal ends up connecting with Lexi. And as you watch the show, you'll really see how they connected. And I really feel like it almost was kind of like a little bit of a bromance, but they had a really good emotional connection. So I think that's an interesting couple to watch. Yoli ends up with Xander, and their path and how their relationship goes lives up to absolutely who Yoli has been touted out to be, based off Mal's experience with Yoli falling really deep. And Xander, I think, really surprised their former partner Vanessa on being able to connect with somebody outside of Vanessa. So Mal ends up with Lexi. Xander ends up with Yoli. If you look at Vanessa, who was formerly with Xander, Vanessa ends up with Lexi's ex, Ray. And that was a random pairing as well, but there's a lot of drama surrounding that one, and it's definitely worth watching the show to figure out where that drama stems from and how it continues throughout the entire series. You gotta watch it. All I'll say is Fingergate is real in this show, and it's an interesting thing to experience. What's really cool, though, is with Tiff and Mildred and Sam and Aussie. They basically swapped partners. And when I tell you, I really, even though it was a crazy outcome, I thought this was fantastic, because it really highlighted what each individual needed to work on in their own relationships. And even if they may or may not have chosen those people in real life, I think those were the best choices for this experiment, because it really highlighted things that they all needed to see. So that was definitely something that was an interesting combination. So at the end of those 3 weeks, through this process, they meet friends of their new partners, and those conversations are great. Actually, I feel like this Ultimatum season picked perfect friends to highlight, and you see an array of reactions to what's happening, and I absolutely recommend people to watch it just for that, just for the reactions of the friends to these new partnerships and marriages. And they really help to call out some of the deficiencies and the problems within their actual friends or family members. They don't just make it a target to say, hey, I'm going to target this new person you're with. They actually honestly target people they know and say, are you sure? Is this right? Are you doing the right thing? So I love that about how the Queer Love Ultimatum worked. At the end of those 3 weeks, though, they ultimately have to go back to their original partners and spend 3 weeks with them, because it's only fair to see what it would be like then to be completely focused on your partner after you've went through this experiment. And you'll see multiple couples go through a lot of emotions and a lot of stress, and a lot of things come up during this time. And I think it's totally worth watching the show to actually experience it for yourself rather than me telling you, because it's not the same. You have to experience it for yourself to watch these episodes. Ultimately, at the end of this show, there are multiple proposals that happen. Some of them accept and some do not. And I'd be curious, if you're watching this review that I'm giving, do you want to know my reaction to the finale and to who said yes or who said no to proposals? Because I don't want to spoil it for you if you haven't seen it and this video prompts you to go watch it. So I'd rather focus this video on the first part of the experiment and see if you guys want to hear my opinions on the finale and also on the reunion that they showed and the aftermath, because I've been following all these people online and seeing their stories and how they feel and what's happening in the aftermath of that. So if you want to keep talking about it, please let me know. But you guys, go watch the Queer Love Ultimatum, and it's Pride Month. Live it up, have the moment, This show is absolutely worth it. A fantastic watch. But yes, let me know. Otherwise, you guys have a fantastic evening. Thanks for joining me. I will see you soon. Bye.